Your DJ has only just begun.
What should I know?
Yo, DJ!
Are you done mixing yet?
Your DJ has only just begun.
The DJ accepts no responsibility for the next record. This is a request.
Yo, what the baddest mix this? No man, tell me nothing. Yeah. Racism is alive and well. If we as black people and people of color don't get ourselves together, form some kind of unification, foundation with the talk economically to capitalism business. It's real. Listen to me now. Racial profiling. It's a serious thing. A bird without wing. Racial profiling. Listen, me king, this on your top of ranking. Racial profiling. It's a serious thing. A bird without wing. Racial profiling. I saw the thing set in a this system. I cannot breathe. Living while black, much less gonna Starbucks. Living while black, up against the clan. Living while black, life in my hand. Living while black. Calamus in we under constant attack. Master race, master plan, the try to hold it back. Smoke it on, little rhythm, give me one drop. Your movements, they just can't stop. I cannot sell water as a POC. Hermit party will call the COP. I cannot enter a pool as a POC. Pool patrol parlor calling the COP. If I am grilling in the park as a POC, barbecue Betty will call the COP. If I check into an AR and B, my persuasion cannot be a for POC. Racial profiling is a serious thing. Burning a wing. Racial profiling. Listen, me king is on your top around king. Racial profiling is a serious thing. Burning a wing. Racial profiling. Them feeling emboldened. Showers them taking is golden. Y'all them lips loose like Snowden. Like they don't know say we are the chosen. Them entitled and privileged. Them could call another human race savage. It's nothing but a sacrilege when we get used as collateral damage. Racial profiling. It's a serious thing. Bird without wing. Racial profiling. Listen, me king, this on your top of ranking. Racial profiling. It's a serious thing. Bird without wing. Racial profiling. So the thing set in a this a shit steam. Overdosing pon the Kool-Aid. Them consume with disdain and hatred. The masses is tired of being berated. And like that civil wars get started. All due to them policies ripping apart.
Yes, G, Mike.
Good evening. We're on?
One love, brother, we live. How you doing?
Every time. Good evening, CY. Thanks for moderating there in New York City. I am G. Michael Reed. I want to invite you once again to our weekly podcast. This is a magazine that covers a wide range of topics, have some interesting guests. And tonight we have a very interesting guest coming on. I want to also remind you that next week we have scheduled former Commissioner of Police Crispin Jeffries. Quite a interesting person and has a lot of information, and that's his take on a few of the things that are happening nowadays out there in Belize. He's retired for quite a number of years now, but he's active in his community. We had a couple of hours today just hanging out and chatting, and I tell you, he's as interesting as he has ever been. I want to tell you that we are joined every week by Joe Coway and Greg Morrison, our two co-hosts on this show. We try to stay away from agendas. We're not biased. We don't forward nobody's policies and whatnot. We just try to do what we can to make it interesting and entertaining for you. Joe, say something, Joe, because yeah, no, it's not working, Joe. It's not working, Joe. That's too bad. I don't know what you to do. What, because it was happening at one time. There was a time when you were coming over clear. What did you change? What did you do differently? Are you on a different forum? Is it still WhatsApp? Still, or yeah, you're very muffled there. You're muffled bad. Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm not hearing you. I hear you, but it's very muffled. Maybe the mic, something wrong with the mic. I don't know.
We cut that out. That's the good, and everything worked well. We tried it with Zoom, and everything worked well.
I hope that it's a natural song. Cause then I have to be worried about you.
Everything down there, I sang about them.
Well, who?
My son, I'm shooting son.
My son?
Yes. My son, shooting son.
Oh, I don't know.
It's in the studio.
It wouldn't be in the studio because then it would affect all of us. It's not in the studio.
Let me leave and come back to you.
See what you could do. Check the mic too, man, and turn off the fan too, and maybe see what's going on there, no? Yeah, Joe is one of our regular co-hosts. He brings a lot of experience to the show. You'd be surprised because you'd think he'd be on the. He's a former politician, of course, a former PUP politician, but he does not have that inclination to be biased on that side. I find that he's very objective, and he calls it how he sees it, which is what we try to do here on the show. We don't again go down the lane of forwarding anybody's agenda, promoting anybody's point of view. We throw it out there, we discuss it, we see what we can do to come up to an objective viewpoint. We're going on 2 years actually here. April makes us 2 years doing the show. We have some faithful followers and listeners, and we want to say good evening and thank you very much for joining us every week, taking the time out to tolerate our rhetoric. We hope that you will continue to proffer opinions and comments so that we know where you're coming from. We're expecting a special guest this evening, a poet, author, philosopher, a gentleman that has been around for a while and is well established. And Joe is back again. Let's see what we can do. CY, can you hear Joe? I can hear you, Joe. I hear you, but you're muffled. You're not clear at all. And you turn off the fan? Yeah. I don't. They're not from the studio. I'm pretty sure, or all of us would have the same problem. I don't know what that could be, but and it's the same program you've been using that you had been using all along. Yeah.
Yeah, G Mike.
Yeah. You hear the song?
I didn't hear it in the back there still. I didn't hear it.
Yeah, I don't know that what. It's not from the studio, right? I don't.
No, it's not from me.
Yeah.
You gotta turn it. You gotta turn your mic down, or you'll drift back on the mic. Something like that maybe could help. All right, say something now. Don't lean forward, man.
Lean back and say, Joe. Lean back, Joe. All right, say something now. Boy, no boy.
No, boy, I still hear on thing, man.
Yeah, you not clear at all, boy. You not clear. I don't know what could be the problem there.
We started today on Zoom and everything worked out.
Yeah, no, we don't get.
We could knock off everything, I know.
You got mute. All right. Say, recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah. Allegiance.
Yeah. No, Joe. No, boy. I don't know. Yeah, we have to try, man.
Let me try the phone. I will set this off and try the phone.
All right. Gregory is not in yet. Gregory should be coming in shortly. See why you got confirmation from the guest, right? So Buller should be in, and I have to be careful because I keep thinking Bulwa, but it is Buller. Mr. Buller is an accomplished poet and author. He has written 4 books available on Amazon, and well, I'll let him do his promotions when he come in. He should have been in by now, unless you get him on the 9 o'clock time. See why? Because it's we start 8 Eastern Standard, not 9. I made that mistake when I did that promo, so we can't run that, but we'll have that running soon. The karaoke, I did about 20 takes and none of them come out good. So I'm not.
You do how much?
20 takes. 20 of them didn't come out. I noticed we're following a story. Well, the OJ Elwington story is still out there, and I don't know what's going on with that. We have to. All right, I'm getting an echo now. See why? That might be.
All right. Yeah,
YouTube.
make I lock off my thing.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I'm saying that there's a video that was circulating, apparently showing the girls having fun with him, and there's a news outlet or pseudo news outlet that was suggesting. Good evening, hi Lisa. Thank you. That video was showing the girls having fun with Mr. Elrington. The commissioner and the minister of police spoke on it and wasn't happy about that. But I'm saying, obviously, it's not a crime if they haven't charged him. Why has he not been charged? There are conflicting stories. There are some people who felt that the girls just went there to have fun, and after having fun, they weren't happy with the fun they had. I don't know what it is. We do know that in this day and age, when a woman says no, it is no. So it doesn't matter if she went to the house with him, if she was drinking and having fun, if she did not want to partake in any such games and she said no, then it is no. The unfortunate thing is that in situations like those, it's difficult to prove because it's my word against yours. And unless you have some kind of evidence, some video or something capturing a moment, even if you go to court and they arrest him and take him to court, it's not a high probability of him being arrested. You have a couple of other things out there, of course, and the people in the cane industry are still kicking up dust. We don't know when that's gonna be taken care of. It's been since Tate and I left. BSI was there for a while, and we're gonna have to figure something out because of one of our few industries. So how can we be growing, milling, producing sugar and not have sugar for our people?
Are you hearing me now?
Yeah, we go. You fix it, the weirdo.
Well, let me do something. I'm on the phone. I think what I happened, it looked like I had to sign in completely over.
Okay, because you're on. We hear you know. I see,
Right. Can I do something? You go ahead and I will try shift back to the computer to see if it works now. I think I find out what it could be.
Okay, wonderful.
So I'll be back shortly. That's what me.
All right. I see Mr. Buller is on. See why? Do you have a picture there for him? Mr. Buller, can you hear me? Hello, 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 hello. Yeah, yeah, but anyway, we're there's a apparent a sudden death in, I believe it was Willis Bank, where a lady was found with a gash in the back of her head. And initial reports were that maybe she was hit by a vehicle or something. Last I heard, they arrested the husband because there were blood stains found even at the house. That terrible situation. And yes, the domestic abuse thing is out of order, and it's ridiculous, man, because if two people make a decision to live together, they're going to have to find better ways of. No, you're going bad. You're going back bad. I think you have to try the phone. Yeah. Yeah, man. Fine. Okay. Yeah, they if they get together and they can't work out, either you part amicably, or you get some kind of counseling, or you get somebody else involved that could maybe mediate between the two. But the violence part of it is ridiculous, in particular when there are children involved. Because I think this guy said he came home and heard his son crying, and that's when he realized the lady was missing. I don't know how anybody could do that, even if you get away with it, and then live with your conscience, because your conscience will not be denied. You can't fool that, and that is there facing you every step of the way. So I see Mr. Buller is apparently trying to get on, having a little difficulty there. Munchie, how are you, son? Respect every time. My buddy there from Orange Walk, correct? Munchie's checking in. Joe is going to be here shortly, and Joe is already here, but having a little difficulty getting linked up. Gregory is usually on time. Today must be caught up in some. He's a hard worker there in Los Angeles, making sure things run well in the technology industry. Mr. Buller is an author, poet, philosopher. I believe he's been.
I might be
theologian. Here we go. How are you, sir? Good evening.
I am good, thanks. I've been having trouble. I
figured there's some difficulty there. It's not a perfect science, so we have to tinkle with it. Yeah.
I totally understand.
All right. Here comes Joe. Do you know Joe Cowie?
Not personally, but I've seen him many times on air.
All right. You are Buller and not Bulwa.
That's correct.
Correct. But Carlton Buller. I understand you're a poet, an author, a philosopher, humanitarian. Did I miss anything?
Well, I've been called worse.
Yeah, I know you're a thinker, and you tend to, from time to time, put your thoughts down on words. Correct?
Correct.
You've written how many? 4 or 5 books?
I've published 4 now.
Okay, and this is your 5th one coming up?
No. This one that was just published is the 4th.
Okay.
I have 2 more in the pipeline.
All right. This is the one that's the create your own masterpiece, I believe it is.
Become your masterpiece.
Become your masterpiece. You want to tell us a bit about that? Why such a title?
Well, it's a long story, but I'll put it as short as I can for you.
Okay.
First of all, I believe that we were all born to. You can hear me?
I heard you. There's something happened there just now for a minute.
Right. Yeah. We were all born to become the best possible version of ourselves. And I believe that whenever we fulfill, if we all fulfill that purpose, the world would be a much better place. We would uplift all of humanity. So first and foremost, that title reflects my mission to help people become all that they were meant to be.
You believe there's a specific route then that you can travel to get to that point?
Absolutely.
What are some of the keys without revealing the whole content of the book?
Well, first and foremost, you have to get to know yourself. Most of us don't really understand much about ourselves. We superficially do, but deep on a spiritual level, we don't. And part of the reason is because we don't spend enough time trying to understand ourselves, and we don't spend enough time with ourselves. And so one of the first things that I recommend, in fact, one of the very first pieces in the book, by the way, the book delivers its messages through poetry and highly stylized prose, and also images. Now, the very first piece is called Stillness. And essentially what it says, as a matter of fact, I'm going to read it to you.
Good.
Nothing better than getting it straight from the source.
Wonderful, wonderful.
All right. So this piece called Stillness. Fear not that I blunder. When seemingly alone I ponder. Worry not for me, if a recluse I appear to be. And if congested roads I do not travel, it is not that my life is soon to unravel, or even that I am somber and morose. Instead, enthralled by whispers of wondrous prose, and music and song in silent verse, I marvel at the absolute brilliance of the universe in concealing the wisdom of the ages deep within the serene pages of nothingness and stillness.
Deep indeed. All right, I'll ponder upon that more when I get that book, because I will find that book. It's available where? In bookstores and on Amazon?
Well, at all of the major bookstores and many independents. It's also available online at Amazon.com as a hardcover and as an ebook.
Obviously, you're a Belizean. You left Belize at what age? How long have you been in the U.S., more or less?
Left Belize at the age of 20, so I've lived more than twice as long in the U.S. as I had in Belize.
Wow. Okay. And were you always into writing, or did you do other things that led you maybe to this point?
The way I got into writing is quite interesting. In 1974, I was in the U.S., in the United States Marine stationed on the island of Guam. And one day, out of the blue, I was out on the parade ground with lots of other people milling around, but I was by myself. And I suddenly heard a voice say to me that you should become a writer. But you shouldn't write fiction, only truth, material that will help people to improve their lives. My immediate and silent response was, okay, but I don't have anything to say.
Yeah,
That's the end of the conversation, and I was left with the distinct impression that these were instructions for the future. And afterwards, I went right back to my same old destructive behavioral patterns. It would be, it was in 1980, that was 1974. In 1980, after I'd been discharged from the Marines and was living in San Francisco, going to school on the GI Bill. I was going to university on the GI Bill. And let me just tell you, a lot of bad things have happened in my life, and there was a period of time there where I almost committed suicide. And I wrote a poem that saved my life. That was the very first poem that I wrote. Now, I'd always been mindful ever since that incident with that voice that I heard on the island of Guam, that I needed to comply with these instructions. But writing was the hardest thing for me. I was a good writer, but actually sitting down and doing writing, I had difficulty doing it for whatever reason. Eventually, in the year 2000, by that time I had moved to Florida. That was when I finally sat down and wrote the very first book. And it was not because I wanted to, it was because of the emotional pain that I was going through that actually forced me to do that. And that was the beginning of it. And at the end of, afterwards, after that book had been written and published, I knew I wanted to continue writing. Complying with those instructions didn't necessarily mean writing one book, because the instructions were become a writer, and one book does not a writer make. So I knew I had to continue, But I struggled for the next 9 years with this notion that I had nothing to say. And there are lots of things that I've realized about that. But at the end of the day, I wrote that next book in 2009. And then the following year, while I was reviewing the first printed copy, the proof, I was sitting by my father's bedside. He was in his 99th year at that point, completely blind and having more serious health problems. And as I sat by his bedside and I was reading that proof, I suddenly realized that I was learning from the lessons it contained. Now, the obvious question for myself was, how is it possible that I could be learning from a book that I had written? And in the end, I realized in those moments, first and foremost, I could never ever take credit for anything that I write, because every single time I write, my hand is guided. And in the end, everything that I write is coming through me and not from me.
What is your religious upbringing?
I was raised in a very religious family. First and foremost, I was surrounded by religion. We attended the Catholic Church, but next to our house was the Anglican school. On the other side of the Anglican school was the Catholic convent. On the other side of that was the Catholic church. On the other side of that was the Catholic school that I attended, Sacred Heart School. And in the other direction, a couple of houses down, there was the Anglican church, and then a few more houses down the Methodist compound. So religion was all around me. But by the time, and then I went to Lynham College after I left Sacred Heart School, and that was one by by the time, and then I went to Lynham College after I left Sacred Heart. This could be me with my volume a little too loud, so I'm going to turn it down, and maybe that screeching will stop.
Okay.
All right, I've turned it down a bit. Let's see what happens. So at Lynham College, every single day, first thing we got up at 5 in the morning, and the first thing we had was Mass before anything else. And so after 4 years of that, because of a number of things that had happened in my life, I became disillusioned and walked away from organized religion. And so now I consider myself spiritual but not religious.
Wonderful. Let me welcome to the show Lisa Castanedas. Because Lisa is a regular. She's most usually in the background, but I see you decided to step forward, Lisa, and join us this evening. You jump right in if you have a few questions you want to ask Mr. Buller here. Are you familiar with Mr. Buller?
Hi. I'm not familiar. Good evening, guys, and thank you for having me. Thank you for joining our panel tonight. I am not familiar with your work. However, I'm very interested in something that you mentioned as I was logging on, and that is the military and your poem about suicide and how it helps you. A lot of people don't understand how that lifestyle can be life-changing for several men and women out there. Would you be able to elaborate on that?
Yes. So I first of all, before I go there, G Mike, I do remember you. I don't know if you remember, but when I wrote my first book, and I was in Belize in 2000, you did interview me at the time that book was first published. Do you recall that?
Actually, no. I'm trying. And what forum was it? Where?
Was there a radio station 2000 or something like that?
Yes, indeed. Yes. All right, that rings a bell. It was myself and Mike Nicholson. Was Mike Nicholson there? Remember that big?
You were the only one that did the interview.
Okay, yeah, that was FM 2000. Yes, indeed, owned by Gerald Garbutt. Yeah, that was that would have been around 2000. Yeah, just before I left to go work with the police department. I vaguely remember it, and if I think long enough, I bet I'll remember more of it. But yes, okay, well, wonderful.
Right. So the reason that I brought that up in response to the question is because that first book was about child abuse. In fact, I think that book is what began the conversation in Belize about child abuse, which was very, very rampant in Belize. And it wasn't just child abuse, it was multiple sexual abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, all that kind of stuff. So that is the history. That's my history. And the part that you missed was that poem was not really about suicide. That poem is what saved me when I was about to commit suicide. I had driven up to Twin Peaks in San Francisco, which is a very tall hill in the middle of the city where all the tourists go to overlook the city. About 4 o'clock in the morning, I went up there, and I wasn't really planning, thinking. I was really just reacting more like a robot and knowing what I was going up there to do. Got up there, parked my car at the edge of the cliff, stuck my hand in the glove compartment, pulled it out with a pen and a piece of paper I didn't even know were there, and proceeded to write my very first poem.
Instead of driving over, you wrote the poem.
Yes.
Is that it?
Yes. I didn't even know what I was doing, but obviously, somebody, some entity, some higher power was looking after me and looking out for me. And I can tell you that that wasn't the first time. That I've had multiple situations in my life where I came close to death. Wow. Some out of my control, some caused by myself. But in the end, I survived so many of those that most of them without even a scratch, that I came to believe that I must be here for a special purpose.
Yeah, I would imagine. Now, the follow-up on Lisa's question, did the military have something to do with this mindset that you developed, this self-destruction? Was this after the military? Was it some experience in the military maybe that did that?
No. Actually, no. This happened as a result of the horrible legacy of child abuse. When you're abused as a child, if there is no early intervention, then you ultimately have to carry that legacy on your own. And the way that you do it is you repress. The psychological term is that you repress those memories, meaning you have to bury them. And you bury them so deep, you hide them even from yourself. So you go through much of your life, your young adulthood, not even knowing that, not even remembering that you had that horrible past. And you can maintain for a while, but ultimately your grades are going to suffer. And when you get a job and get out there in the real world, you're going to be able to maintain for a while. But deep down inside, there's a quiet storm that's raging and nobody knows.
From your experience now, would you say it's better to hide them and leave them hidden, or bring them to the surface and face them?
Absolutely not better to hide them. However, you can't bring them to the surface and face them if you don't even know that they're there. So let me tackle those two things separately.
Right.
First of all, the part about keeping them hidden. If you do not do anything about it, and I know this from personal experience with my father because he too was abused as a child, exactly the same way that I was. And I learned about this when I was 40 years old, when I finally recovered the memories because of the emotional pain from the breakup of a relationship. Asked him about it. He said he didn't know about it. He and my mother were living with me. I was a single man living in a suburb of San Francisco. And so I asked him if he knew about it. It was too late to talk to her about it because she was paralyzed. I asked him. He said he didn't know, and I believed him because he was always away from the home working. In any event, once you recover the memories, you enter an even more painful period in your life. But that is your first opportunity to begin your journey of healing and transformation. So back to the part about keeping it hidden. And so if you don't find a way to heal yourself, even after you recover the memories, whether or not you recover the memories, in your old age, when you reach an advanced age and you're close to death, those memories will come back to you and they're going to haunt you.
Well, you know, I've heard before that you can't really trust your memory, that there are many times when you think of things that you think you remember and it's not necessarily the way that it was. Are you confident that is there a way you believe that you can verify those memories, pull those memories up? Could it be you might have been misunderstanding some things that transpired? What do you think?
So first and foremost, that thing about not trusting your memory is overrated. But beyond that, there are enough witnesses. I have siblings, and all of them remember the same things. Yeah. First and foremost, okay. But in 2013, I traveled to New York from Miami to personally forgive my primary perpetrator in person. Now, I also have neighbors who I am in contact with. When we were growing up in what was then Stand Creek Town, there were 2 houses in the yard. And Seddy Elrington and his family, his father was a sanitary inspector. And they'd been in PG, and then it was transferred from PG to Dalriga, which is what it is now. And so they rented the other home from us, the other house from us in the yard, and lived right next to us. And I have had numerous conversations with him about that. I had no idea when he told me for the first time a couple of years ago. I didn't even know that they were aware of some of the things that were going on. But he and I have had many discussions about that. So there is no question in my mind, and any of my siblings and anybody in my family, about what went on.
All right. Have you discussed in any of your books the actual events of this, or do you just go about the process of healing and recovering?
That's what my first book was about. The name of that book was Stolen Innocence, and the subtitle is The Autobiography of a Lost Soul. And it describes in great detail everything that happened and the impacts, the legacy, up until the point where I wrote that book. Now I'm focused on moving forward. And so all of the lessons that I've learned since the year 2000 when I wrote that book, based on research that I've done, based on realizations about my own life, based on people that I've talked with, about what has happened with them and groups and organizations that I belong to, all of the things that I've learned about the impacts and about how to get beyond them, that is what I'm focused on now in the upcoming books, and helping people to overcome all that and become all that they were meant to be.
Do you believe at this point in your life you have overcome these challenges? Do you think that right now you're able to move ahead and not ever again get to that point where you're on that cliff thinking about jumping off?
So it is my belief that you're never 100% healed, and I've been told that by others as well. However, the answer to that is a resounding yes. I'm way beyond that. I will never ever go back to that place. I'm in a totally positive place now. And by the way, that urge to help others, if you do the research, you will find out that a great many people who become psychiatrists, therapists, counselors, actually are survivors of child abuse. And so it seems that one of the overriding urges, once you survive that, is to help others who are more other of the unfortunate ones. But yes, the answer is yes. All of the healing that I believe I will be able to achieve, I've achieved. though I continue to focus on healing and transforming myself. And those moments of despair and despondence, that's way behind me.
You spoke about being close to different religions growing up. Which one had the most effect on you, and where do you stand now as far as your religious belief?
Well, I mean, I was raised in the Catholic Church and in the Catholic faith. So that was the one that had the greatest impact on me. But I must tell you, as an aside, so I was a Catholic. I had relatives who were Anglican and others who were Methodist. But in those days, the Catholic Church didn't want you to go and visit any other church. But I used to pass by Anglican church and listen to them. And I will tell you that the hymns and the songs that I heard them singing in that church were way better than the ones that we sang in the Catholic Church.
More joyful, for sure.
Yeah. And I was always in love with the music that I heard coming out of that church. And sometimes I would just go passing by there when they had service, just so I could listen to that stuff.
Mr. Buller, you said that presently you are not associated with any particular religion.
Correct.
But I take it that does not mean that you are an atheist or an agnostic.
No, absolutely not. I believe in God.
So to me, I like the book that you're referring to in the terms of, the question for me is this. I think the substance of the book seems to be as to how we are to live.
Mm-hmm.
So I will ask you if you can, in a very brief way, define how you believe we are to live as social beings. We know that you are not associated with a particular religion, which many of us get our moral values and the way we are to live from our religious belief. But now that you are not associated, what would you consider to be the philosophical anchor, if I could describe it as such?
So I will
tell you social beings to live.
That I believe that there is a place for religion, and children in particular get a very good foundation from religion and the religious organizations, the religious schools, etc., etc. It's a very good foundation that they absolutely need. But my issues with religion way back was that there are bad sides to religion, to organized religion as well. And I've seen many religions since I've been in America where the pastors are all about money, right? I have seen religions where I was dating this woman once who was a Baptist, and they have this tithing system where they were required to give 10% of their salary. So the woman got a night job, okay, to help to make ends meet because she was having a tough time. And then the pastor came to her and told her that she needed to give 10% of that night job salary as well, right? And so she complained bitterly to me about that. And this was a pastor whose home was being paid for by the church, whose car was being paid for by the church, whose wife's car was being paid for by the church, and probably their food too. So there are all sides to that coin. There are many sides to that coin. And yes, man is fallible. Man makes mistakes. And so you can look at all of the abuse that happened in the church with respect to child sexual abuse that happened in many churches. But at the end of the day, a lot of that is about power, not just about religion. The problem is that I see in lots of ways many of these religions trying to control your life too much. Much the same way that politicians try to control your life. And they don't want you to understand that you have the power to save yourself. They want you to believe that they're the only ones who can save you. Okay? If you look at all the religions across the world, they all have issues with each other. More people in this world were killed as a result of religious fanaticism and anything else. The Crusades, I mean, on and on and on. I could go on and on. Look at what happened to the Native Americans when the Christians came here to try and colonize and Christianize them. So all of that stuff bothers me when it comes to all of the atrocities that are done in the name of religion. And that's one of the reasons why I no longer subscribe to organized religion.
Can I before I
Yeah.
come back to the question,
Yes.
I would like to make a comment on what you said just now.
Yes.
And I hold a different belief from you in that is that I do not believe your calling, whether you are a priest, a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, a cabinet maker, I don't believe your calling defines you. I think your calling reveals who you are. So those who are attracted to becoming preachers,
Mm-hmm.
it's not the religion or the belief in that calling that defines them or make them what they are.
Mm-hmm.
It only reveals them for who they are. But coming back to the salient question.
Well, can I respond to that real quick?
Sure.
I don't have a problem with any of that. However, there are way too many instances where when they do their bad deeds, the organization protects them.
I wouldn't differ with you on it, but I would continue to say that at the end of the day, even if the organization protect you, that in itself, again, doesn't mean that the calling in itself is a bad calling, whether it's politics, law, medicine, being an accountant. These are callings that I believe are virtuous and are necessary for social beings.
So I'm not saying it's a bad calling. I'm just saying it doesn't work for me. That's all.
Yes, but then I would agree with you that it doesn't work for you. But then to me, I want to come back to the question. How would you define the way we are to live? I see it as, in my estimation, I see it as the philosophical anchor of human beings. That there must be something that we will anchor ourselves in. Whether it's be your brothers and sisters keeper, whether it's love one another as I love you, but there must be some kind of philosophical anchor. What you consider it to be in your book or from your own insight into life.
Well, first and foremost, love. All right? Love and the true meaning of love, number one. Number two, peace. Number three, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Number four, love your neighbor, love your enemy, forgive. Most of all, forgive yourself, but forgive others their transgressions, etc., etc. All of the same things that you hear from religions and everywhere else. I just don't feel
you don't think you need religion to get there. That's what you're saying. Yeah. But it's the very doctrines that religion preaches, though. It's the very tenets of religion that you speak about there. So, and I think what Joe might be getting to is that you can be good in religion. You can be bad, but you can be good too. And is it not necessary, in particular with children? And you suggested before that religion is good for children because it gives them a compass, a guide to aspire to know, a way of life.
Yeah.
But what would be the alternative if we don't have religion, so to speak?
Well, I'm not suggesting that you don't have it. I'm saying it's a good thing for the youngsters, but there are lots of things that need to change.
Is there a way we can keep them in check? Is there a way we can be more stringent on the things that religion is allowed to do?
You see, that question then brings politics into the arena, because many of the ways in which you can hold them accountable, you're not able to, because they're protected. Religions get special status, tax exempt status, all kind of stuff. They're not supposed to engage in politics, and over here in this country, they're doing that anyway. Many of them. So it's very difficult to do that without without the government involved. And then all of a sudden, there's supposed to be separation of powers, church and state. So religion is a very powerful thing. The Vatican, for example, is a very, very powerful thing. They have their own city. And that's why the whole world knows how difficult it has been to have any accountability with respect to child sexual abuse in the Catholic Church, because of how powerful the institution is. So it's very difficult to get those changes made.
Good night, Mr. Edwards. Let's give Greg a chance to weigh in, because Greg, I see him, his ears are pricked up there, because these some of the things that he has been preaching about for a long time also. Greg, good evening. Welcome to the show. Your mic is off. Your mic is off, Greg. You're muted. Might be a good thing, huh?
Good evening.
Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone.
Yeah, man.
Good evening.
Yeah, man.
No, I do agree that religion, while it is also a moral compass, you don't need religion to have morality, and that is very important. We have drifted so far to think that the only morality that exists must exist within the religious sphere. But morality is the principle that people should live by, and I think Mr. Carlton, you mentioned some of them. Do unto others as you would like them to do unto you. Respect each other, and so forth. Those are good principles that will ensure the survival of our species and less conflict as we move forward.
Well, Greg, nobody's born with a roadmap as such, and there has to be guiding principles. People, even people that guides you to a certain way. And with children, it's unfortunate that they have taken advantage of young children. But don't you think it's a good thing that you have institutions like these that point them in a certain way? Would that we could get them all pointing children in the same direction? But don't you think we do need that?
Religion to do that? No, we don't need religion to do that. We need good people to do that.
You mean parents?
Good parents, good moral leadership in every sphere of influence, whether it's in the schools, whether it's in the Boy Scout, Girl Scout, or wherever you encounter people. That's what you need to guide them. You don't have to have religion to do that, because religion to me, while it has some benefit, is really a burden on the society. It really is. Sometimes people try to make religion good, but in most instances, it has not served mankind well.
But how about fellowship? How about that? How do you respond to somebody who says fellowship is important? We have to socialize, that's for sure. The little old ladies gather together in the church hall.
That's all good. But if you realize what goes on in most of those church halls, they're not talking about. I would say in 90% of the conversation that's going on, it's things other than religion, but it is communication that binds people together. And so that is good. That's what I'm talking about. I have been to many socials, and if I tell you that 10% or less of it is ever talking about Christianity or saving you or
not when you're wrong, they know how you're going to respond. Carlton, how much of this book that you've written now, this current masterpiece, creating your own masterpiece, how much of this has to do with religion then, and pointing people in the right direction as such?
None of it has to do with religion.
Okay.
It is all about the mechanics of going deep inside, becoming one with the universal currents of wisdom and knowledge, knowing yourself, understanding yourself, and understanding what it takes to become the best that you can be, to overcome the obstacles, the barriers, to transforming your life. Some people who, first of all, many things happen in this life that can program you to fail. And all of those things present barriers that prevent you from becoming all that you were meant to be. It can be abuse, overt abuse. It can be neglect, emotional or physical neglect. It can be abandonment, emotional or physical abandonment. It can be things like wars, genocide, natural disasters, extreme poverty. All of those kinds of things are things that ultimately hinder your ability to become all that you were meant to be.
It could also be laziness. Some people are just what we see as naturally lazy and not progressive in trying to do things for themselves. That is a factor of some human trait.
It can be that as well. That's
How
correct.
do you?
But
how
that
do-
doesn't mean that those people who we might term as lazy are beyond any amount of reclamation if they're presented, put in the right environment and presented with the right set of facts.
How do you
So,
feel
so you
about?
think? So you think? Sorry, just a moment, Mr. Chairman. So you think that with the right incentive, that all people would be motivated? Is that what
Well,
you're
I'm not saying all people. There will always be exceptions.
Okay. Okay.
But many of them that we might automatically write off are not necessarily beyond hope.
I see.
How about using? Yeah, let me get through this. How about using the aid of a joker? Let me say, how about how you feel about marijuana? Because when you talk about going inside, I find that that does it for me. What do you think?
Well, there are a number of studies, many of them more recent, dealing with altered states of consciousness and the benefits of altered states of consciousness in terms of helping you to transform your life and putting you in the correct space and the correct frame of mind. And so those altered states of consciousness can happen in a number of ways. Meditation, they can happen also through substances like marijuana, like other kinds of drugs. I don't know if you've heard of ayahuasca. There's a big thing about people going down to South America with the indigenous folks and ingesting ayahuasca and going through these altered states of consciousness. And once they're done with that experience, they're changed because of the things that they see and experience while they're there, right? So I don't knock anybody who has their own thing that they want to take to help them through those altered states of consciousness that those things generate, achieve a different level, move to a different level in terms of their journey to become all that they were meant to be.
I haven't heard of that, but I'm definitely interested.
Lots of things.
Lisa, go ahead, Lisa. Go ahead.
Outside of your masterpiece, Mr. Roller, I wanted to the way how you've presented your masterpiece book and what it entails. How would I bridge your masterpiece of positivity with the law of attraction? The law of attraction is if you put positive out in the universe, you shall receive positive in return. How would I be able to bridge that with your masterpiece and your writing?
So this book is really an introduction to the concept of becoming your masterpiece. And by that I mean that what this book does is it gently eases you into a way of life where it becomes almost second nature to go deep inside and do all of the things, or begin to do all of the things necessary to get you on that path. So you mentioned the law of attraction. That's only one path and one thing that you can do. There are affirmations, right? Mantras. There's visualization. There are lots of things that you can do, meditation. There are lots of things that you can do that come under the quote-unquote metaphysical umbrella. And by the way, metaphysics is really just the branch of philosophy that studies the fundamental nature of reality, right? And there are essentially four branches of philosophy. And so metaphysics is one of them. Epistemology is another one, logic is another one, and ethics is another one. And metaphysics is the one that deals with the fundamental nature of reality. So it includes first principles of being or existence, identity, space, time, cause and effect, necessity, actuality, and possibility. And all those things that you talk about with things that, like you may have seen in the movie The Secret, the law of attraction, affirmations, all those kind of things are actually tools that you can use to help to get you to that better place. And so, well, just so let me just finish up. So Become Your Masterpiece basically introduces you to the concept, gets you to begin to think in terms of being meditation, but also stillness, going to your favorite place, whether it's by the water, in the mountains, by a lake, by a stream, wherever, where you can sit in quiet solitude and reflect. And this introspective reflection is one of the most important things. And so when you go do that and you begin to meditate, you sit silently and you observe the thoughts that come into your head. You don't try to still your mind completely and free it of thoughts. You just observe these different thoughts as they're going through your head, coming in, going out, and you observe the patterns.
You're saying you don't stare at them either.
That's your mindfulness, is it, Mr. Buller?
Yes, that's all part of it. And there's a new movement now that is called mindfulness and meditation. And yes, it encompasses all of that.
Okay.
So in basic retrospect, what your book is designed to do is to help our audiences and readers to navigate through the beginning steps of finding purpose in life and creating their own happiness, correct?
Exactly. And the next two books that are coming delve more deeply into the actual process steps that you take to get there. This one is more light. If I had hit people with the heavy stuff in the beginning, they'd probably pick it up and put it down, right? But for those who take the introduction, take it seriously, get on that path, then they're ready to move to the next step. Then the next ones that I'm coming with, those are the ones that get more in depth about.
So basically, it's a. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Lisa.
So basically, I just want to get a better understanding for the audiences out there. Being an audience myself, would these tools that you've researched and created in your book, are you going to do workshops in that helping your readers navigate through these life courses?
Yes, the answer to that is yes. I will be doing workshops, but I'm also working on some self-paced online courses that will be available, so people can do it at their own pace.
I saw somewhere that you had spoken to a Native American shaman, I believe you called him. What are some of the things that you credit for having reached to the point where you are and where you can even reach out and help other people to get there?
Well, the main thing, first and foremost, as we go back to the beginning, one of the things that happens to you when you're abused as a child, well, let me step back and say this, right? Much of what I am doing now has been informed by my experiences from childhood all the way up to where I am now. And the lessons that I learned in the process of healing myself from the horrible effects of childhood abuse, I found are applicable well beyond the survivor community. So even people who were not themselves survivors of abuse can benefit from these lessons. And so as I present this, I'm presenting it in two ways. First, to those who are trying to transform their lives and don't have that history, all that baggage to carry with them. And then those who are trying to transform their lives, but they face these barriers, these almost insurmountable obstacles, because, they don't have a clue that they need to reclaim their lives before they can transform their lives. And part of reclaiming your life is if you haven't already recovered those repressed memories, then I help people to find a way to recover them. And once you recover them, then I help them to deal with that, to heal from it, to get over it, put it behind them, and then to move into the phase where now they can transform their lives, starting from the same place where the non-survivors started, to move on to transform their lives. And there was a second part of that question that I missed, I think. What was that?
I believe it was Lisa. Lisa, your question?
No, but he brought up something very interesting with talking about recovery and healing. Many don't know this, and I guess I will go public with it. As a young teenager, I was raped and molested at the age of 13. And over the years, I've had, and mostly during my teenage years, I started with severe trauma to deal, the trauma that led me to continue to be positive, started with counseling and therapy. However, at my age today, there are certain things that would trigger me to remember some of those past trauma, I should say. But I don't know if there's actually a point where we can say that we heal. I think it's more of acceptance and not starting to create a new problem and just say that we were victims, and be able to accept that we were victims of something that we were not to blame for. In other words, I learned how to deal with that in that retrospect. So how would you, as an author and researcher, what advice would you give me today to be able to cope with some of the things that happens after trauma? Because I always feel that trauma is a lifetime. You'll have it forever, but you learn how to cope with it. And I always tell people, I cope with the situation. I can speak freely about my trauma, with no longer being hurt by it or having self-blame.
So first of all, let me say how sorry I am that you had to go through that. Nobody should have to go through that, but it happens. It's a part of this world, and so we deal with it. With respect to the things that trigger you, I thoroughly understand that. Been there, done that. Now let me tell you my experience about how I healed myself. But before I do that, let me also say, many people that you hear about a midlife crisis all the time. Mm-hmm. Many times in this world, the cause of that midlife crisis is something that happened in that person's childhood. Now, whether you were overtly abused, or you just happen to come from a dysfunctional family. There was alcoholism, there was drug use or abuse, or there was domestic violence. If you are from a family where there was abuse, but you yourself were not abused, one of your siblings was, you exhibit the same symptoms. You suffer from the same thing as that child who was abused. But going back to the symptoms and how to get beyond this. Here's what happened with me. When I was in my 40th year, I think I mentioned before, my parents were living with me. My father was 80 years old. That's when I recovered the memories. And then I knew that I needed to write. And instinctively, you heard about the thing where I heard about that voice in Guam. And so for 10 years, from 1989 to 1999, I wanted to write that first book. And I was prevented because of all the shame and guilt, because of all the ugly truths I knew would have to be revealed. Now, guilt and shame are two of the main factors that plague you when it comes to being a survivor, an unhealed survivor of abuse. Nevertheless, When I finally began to write that book in early 2000, February of 2000, I was undergoing so much emotional pain that I had no choice but to finally sit and write. I naively gave myself 6 weeks to write that book, even though I'd never written a book, didn't know the first thing about writing a book. But this is what I talk about, being guided. The moment you set yourself on the path, you're going to be guided. Whether you want to call them spirit guides, angels, whatever you want to call them, there are entities out there that are looking out for you and are guiding you. And if you set yourself on the right path, you're going to be protected, you're going to be helped. So I began to write. And on the first day, I understood that a box of tissue was not sufficient. I needed a towel because I was crying the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of times, I wrote for 48 hours nonstop. Most days were 18 to 20 hours. At the end of 3 weeks, 400 pages, the story had been told. So now I say to myself, again, naively, I'm going to edit this thing. Knew not the first thing about editing. So all I really was doing was proofreading and correcting the few things that I could see through the tears. But the big surprise for me was that once I began that editing process where I had to read and reread and reread and reread that story, I found myself grieving even more than when I was writing it. Until somewhere suddenly around the end of the second 3-week period, I realized one day that I could read this entire thing without shedding so much as a single tear. Now, what's important about that? I thought I was healed. No, I wasn't. But what I had was a catharsis. I had released the burden, the pain, everything that was weighing on me and holding me back. And so from there, and to tell you another important point, the moment that I realized that I could read this thing without shedding so much as a single tear, all of a sudden, everything changed. The sun seemed like it was shining brighter. Colors seemed brighter. Birds were singing sweeter. So something had been lifted from me that was even preventing all of my senses to fully appreciate everything that was around me. I was a completely different person. And so from there on, it was a process of continuing to do certain things to be able to continue to heal myself. And I didn't immediately get to the point where I couldn't be triggered by certain things, but I eventually got beyond that just by being consistent. And that process that I stumbled upon, I later formalized into a process that anybody can use. And writing, by the way, happens to be one of the best ways to connect with your soul.
A lady asked a very interesting question there.
Mm-hmm.
Is it are you able to deal? Is it possible to deal with the trauma as such without? I'm trying to remember exactly what she said. I wish she'd put it back up. Can you without? Is it possible to change your life without dealing with that abuse that happened in childhood? I guess you have to confront it at some time, I imagine, huh?
No, because remember what I said earlier? When I at the age of 49, going on 50, I moved into the same room with my 98-year-old father and proceeded to provide round-the-clock care. The biggest surprise for me, even though I had learned at the age of 40 that he too had been abused in the same way that I was, there was other abuse he suffered that I didn't know about. But the biggest surprise was that the very first night I put him to bed. I was sleeping in the same room. He was in a hospital bed in the room. I was sleeping in another regular bed in the same room. Put him to bed and I went to bed. And was falling asleep when I heard him speaking loudly. I jumped up because I thought he needed help. Turns out, and by the way, he was blind. Completely blind. Turns out he didn't need help. He was speaking to himself, okay? Lamenting the ugly things that happened to him as a child, all of the horrible abuse and mistakes he made in his life as a result. Now, the thing is, despite the fact that he had become a successful businessman against all odds, the only things he could focus on as his spark began to dwindle were those horrible things, because he had not found a way to heal himself, you see. And so, and the second thing is that again, I alluded to midlife crisis a little while ago. One of the things that happens to you when you're abused as a child is relationships suffer. It's almost impossible for you to have a successful relationship. Number one, because of lack of trust. You can't trust, especially if it was sexual abuse. But one type of abuse is rarely visited upon anyone. Typically, it's accompanied by 2 or 3 other types of abuse. But again, lack of trust, so relationships fall apart. And then this thing that is gnawing inside of you, if you've not yet recovered those memories and you have no idea what it is, and so you might be at a job in your young adulthood, and you might be maintaining and holding down that job. But eventually, this quiet storm that's inside of you is going to begin to outwardly manifest in terms of dysfunctional behaviors. And eventually, you're not going to be able to keep that job. And you're going to go to several jobs, and the same thing is going to happen again. And then it's going to happen in your relationship. And typically what happens with people is they have a midlife crisis. And during that midlife crisis, which is what happened to me, there is a breakup of a marriage or a serious relationship. And during that time, you go through so much emotional pain and grieve so much that you ultimately end up beginning to recover the memories of the abuse. And when that happens, you do enter a more painful period. But again, it is your first opportunity to begin your journey of healing and transformation.
My question is, isn't life traumatic for most human beings, for most people? That we don't go through life unscathed. We all have some sort of pain from something, even if it's not directly related to any specific type of abuse that we could point to.
But there are certain levels, aren't there, Gregory?
There are degrees, and then there are degrees. Bob Marley said it best: who feels it knows it. If you've never been abused as a child, you might be able to empathize, but you have no idea, not the slightest idea what you go through.
You know,
no, I understand that. That's not what I was trying to imply at. I was trying to think that life for most people is traumatic. You may have an unexpected death in your family, the loss of a parent. You may have something that happens to you personally. You see what I'm saying? So I'm wondering, are those different in some ways than the trauma of abuse, or are they all the same pain? That's what I'm trying. I know you could direct some of it at times to people and look at it as, I was victimized by the behavior and actions, or I was made a victim by the behavior and action of a certain individual. But I'm getting at, is there a difference in the level of trauma we experience because it was such intended to cause us harm, or resulted in us having some type of direct harm from abuse in those nature, but whether it is physical abuse or childhood abuse from some other type of sexual behavior as such.
So go ahead, sorry.
What I'm hearing though, from you also, Carlton, in response to that, is that the book does not only give a guide to abuse people, but people on a whole, how to deal with any type of abuse or any level or degree of that. Because certainly we do, and I was thinking about that while he was saying it, that as children growing up in Belize, we were all abused because our parents were very abusive. That's the way they beat things out there, beat things into you. However, now though, we look at the flip side and we see children coming up entitled, spoiled, and I don't know which was a better way. So that is that where it's at, that you think this book helps anybody, whether you're abused or not?
Yes. So first and foremost, the book is addressed to people who want to transform their lives, right? And it helps you to begin to get into that mental space where you begin to understand the process of going deep inside, becoming one with your inner self, with your higher self, embrace the value of stillness, silent introspection. And then at the end of the book, there's an essay on success. And it breaks down success into the basic steps that you need to go through to succeed. Most people, when they think about success, they think about this thing that is almost on a pedestal that only certain people in life can achieve. And what this book does in that essay in the afterword is break it down so people understand that anybody can achieve success, and these are the steps that you have to go through to achieve it. And the first part of the book, before you get to the afterword, the main part of the book, is a part that helps you to see in some very lighthearted, entertaining ways that there's another side to life, that anything is possible, that success is possible, that you're capable, and that these are the things that you need to begin to think about, not the everyday thing, right? So many people, now two things that I heard earlier. The one about the trauma. There are traumatic events in everybody's life, sooner or later, and so it's a matter of degree. However, when it happens to you as a child at a very young age, especially if it was a deliberate act done by those whom you trusted to care for you and protect you, and yes, to discipline you as well, then it is a special brand of bad, because it messes you up as a child, because your brain, your mind is not yet fully formed. And so here's what happens. Our bodies, our minds, and our spirits are the three centers of our manifestation in this physical world. When we are at our peak, their vibrational frequencies are seamlessly integrated. But disruptions in the flow of energy can prevent the body from effectively collaborating with the mind and spirit, and instead cause it to take impulsive and irrational action, often based solely on physical urges. Similarly, the mind then operates almost in a vacuum and causes illogical emotional outbursts, unwarranted fear, misplaced trust, addictions, inability to love, etc. And the spirit, almost banished from its true place of residence, cannot get through with its intuitive messages of guidance, but even when it does, they're often misinterpreted. That person then reaches adulthood, becomes almost like a zombie, a soulless body walking around with little or no knowledge of its true origins, remarkable potential, or limitless capacity for love, compassion, achievement, and abundance. And it will remain that way until and unless the person finds a way to release the effects of all that negative conditioning, change the programming, and restore the optimal vibrational frequencies. So what this book, Become Your Masterpiece, does is it begins to set you on that track, to get you to a point where it becomes almost second nature to operate that way, to do all of those things. And oh, by the way, if in the process of that, it is discovered that you have these barriers that are in the category of all those things we mentioned, caused by all those things we mentioned, whether it's abuse, neglect, abandonment, wars, and whatever, then there is a special path that you can take to reclaim your life, because for you, you've got to reclaim your life before you can transform your life.
Joe, you have something?
Yeah, I think that listening to the book and what it is supposed to be conveying to us, I think it's a good book, especially if it could be had by parents, because getting to know yourself begins from the cradle. Preparing yourself for the different traumas of life and for the successes that life have to offer you once you get the opportunities. I think it's a book that should indeed be promoted. And I would say that if it could be, a way could be found to try to get it into homes of young parents, those who have an interest in trying to get their children to know themselves. So I would commend the book from the perspective of how you are describing it to us, getting to know ourselves. I think it was Biggie Smaller, one of them, who had said that if you want to change the world, you must first change yourself. So getting to know yourself, I think, is in fact at the center, the epicenter, I must say, of the human development. I must commend the book from the way you are describing it.
Thank you. Now, one thing I want to say about that, right? When I was a youngster in primary school, going to Sacred Heart School in Sand Creek Town, partly because of what I was going through, and I couldn't discuss it with anyone, I became an avid reader. I used to go to the library every week and come back with 5, 6, 7 books. And every week I go back and return those and come back with another set. So it was almost inevitable that I would eventually become a writer. But that was a means of escape for me. And it began to help me with my imagination. Now, my daytime was miserable. And I always looked forward to the nighttime, because at night, I would travel out my body through dreams and go off and visit faraway lands and come back to my bed early in the morning. And so I began to develop some psychic abilities as a result of needing to escape from that abuse. Now, that is one thing that you will find with a great many survivors of child abuse. But with respect to what I wanted to say first, one of the things that happens is, and many studies have been done on these things, and all of what we're talking about, a lot of studies have been done. And one of those studies is that a great many, in fact, a majority of women who are prostitutes were sexually abused as children. Majority of men in prison and women were abused as children. Okay? And what happens? No early intervention. They end up in jail. They have to escape the pain. Inside of them is turmoil, and they have no idea what's going on. So they turn to drugs, and they turn to alcohol, and they become destitute, and so there's a life of crime, etc., etc. However, there is a whole nother set, a bigger majority who don't end up in jail, but these are the ones who develop other addictions, addiction to food. They dull their senses with television, with the phone, with video games, etc., etc., etc. And so all that time is used up as escapism, trying to escape the pain and trauma that they're feeling inside, and they have no idea what in the world is going on. And so for me, it's also about getting people away from all of those painkillers and moving them towards dealing with the pain, getting to know themselves, being with themselves in silence, going through all of this silent introspection. And oh, by the way, reading and writing. Part of the process is journaling. You begin to write. You start with the journaling. And psychiatrists will tell you that the best way to heal from abuse is to journal. But what I discovered is that writing your experiences alone is not sufficient. Once you've written your story, you then must read and reread and reread it until you can do so without any more pain, without any more tears, and that is when you've had the catharsis.
I wanted to ask you a question, Carlton. You spoke about going somewhere and meeting your abuser and forgiving them. Was that person, if it's a person remorseful, do you think they've changed? Because certainly if they did it to one, there's a possibility that might have continued that behavior and had affected other people along the way. What was your takeaway?
There are parts of that story that I won't tell because it's not my story to tell, first of all. And secondly, it is not my intent to scandalize her or anybody else. I tell my story because it is important that I tell my story because it will help other people, but I limit it to certain things. What I can tell you is that By the time I did this, she was in her 90s, early 90s. And two things struck me. Number one, when I was a child, she was an adult towering above me. And when I went to New York to visit her, I had already forgiven her in my heart. And oh, by the way, we have not done justice. We've not even touched on it. But one of the major things is forgiveness. First and foremost, forgiving yourself, and then forgiving the other person. And there are lots of, we can touch on that in a bit if you want to, the importance of that. But so I had already forgiven her in my heart. And then I called her and made the arrangements to come up there to see her. I knocked on the door. I landed at JFK, took a taxi upstate New York, about an hour. And it was raining the entire time. We landed in Wilmington. And so knocked on the door, heard some shuffling inside, and was quite surprised when the door opened. And I'm looking down at this woman who used to tower above me, and now she was barely over 5 feet. And I'm wondering, was she always short and I didn't know it, and she just because she looked tall to me? And so, but part of it is a shrinkage from age, but nevertheless, the juxtaposition of me as a child looking up to her, and now me as a man looking down at her. And so I followed her inside, and we proceeded to have our conversation.
Did she admit that this happened?
Two things about that. Oh yes, she admitted in so many words. Well, she didn't have to admit, but she admitted in so many words, because my question, I first of all said, yeah, I forgive you, blah, 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 but I have some questions. And one of those questions was why. And another one was, is it possible that you yourself suffered abuse as a child? And the response was essentially, I've put all that in the hands of God. Well, to the first question, she put all that in the hands of God, so she wasn't going to be tackling the thing. But the second question was even more telling. Did the same thing happen to you as a child? And the response was, I don't recall. And to me, that was a signal. It wasn't a yes, it wasn't a no, it was an I don't recall, which you see these politicians doing all the time when they don't want to outright lie. Right? So nevertheless, we had our conversation, and she asked me to keep my voice down because the walls were thin, and then we were finished. And she asked me to help her fill out some document, and she went inside her bedroom to get it. And I walked to the window. She lived right by the sea, and looked out, and all of a sudden, the moment I got to the window, the rain stopped and the sun came out. And to me, this was almost emblematic of what had happened in my life. That this was the final act, and that now the rain was over and it would be sunshine from here on. And so she came back, and I helped her fill out her Social Security papers, and then I said my goodbyes and called a cab and went back to the airport, spent the night at the hotel and came back to Florida.
Interesting. And the book is available on Amazon, right? Someone was asking.
Which one? Become a Man.
Yeah, do you have a copy of it there? Can we see it?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, we should have had a picture of it to put up, actually.
You have to hold it on an angle so that the light, because it's
right.
There'll be some reflection on the cover. It's glossy. Let me see. How's that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wonderful. Yeah.
I like the butterflies.
Yeah.
Well,
there's a story behind that too, isn't there?
You know what that is, right?
You tell me.
That's the metamorphosis. The stages that the butterfly goes through to become all that it was meant to be.
Caterpillar.
Exactly.
Yes. And I chose that as my logo. I have a logo that has a butterfly in it as well, because it is very emblematic to me of the process that a survivor goes through. That's the logo. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did
I
you
seek your permission, Mr. Chairman, to
go
exit.
ahead, sir. Go ahead. He's bowing out.
Oh,
Lisa, are
indeed.
you still there? I had
I'm
a question.
still here.
I don't want to take the highlight off of the book, but I wanted to ask Lisa because I like Carlton, and I'm sure like all the other members of the panel, really do. We're sorry that you had to go through what you went through. I feel for that. I'm wondering if you get the urge maybe to lash back out at the society or lash back at that. And I'll tell you why I say that, because I met this young girl when I was growing up, and we had a relationship, but there was always at that certain point where she would tremble, and there was a reaction, and then she would like come at me, and she basically explained to me afterwards that it was as a consequence of some abuse that happened. Do you at times feel like maybe I should lash back out, or are you just uh, settling with dealing with it yourself?
No, I am very, very, very grateful that I had the community and the village of and support when I went through my trauma period as a teenager. So I never felt abandoned. Actually, they embraced the fact that I had said something before it even got worse. So for me to lash out, no, I have never lashed out on anyone. But there are certain things that has happened as I was growing up when it comes to my relationships with men, or with any gentleman, I should say. I don't hug men in a frontal position. I hug men from the side. I can't. I don't. I'm not comfortable with the face to face connection. So there are a lot of things that I know that came from that trauma. One of the things that happened early on when I was going experiencing it, I lost my voice. I lost my speech. And I had to learn how to talk again. And I went to therapy to learn how to talk again. And that's probably where the soft voice comes from and the squeakiness in my voice comes from. And that came from that I did not have it as a child, but as an adult, it stayed. It when I learned how to speak again, that came along with it. So there's certain things that became a part of my new life. And but I have never lashed out because I was given the enough resources and the support um uh, during my childhood years. And even thereafter, as a young adult, I still maintained having counseling and therapy at least once every 6 months to to be able to understand the changes in my life, in my life as I was getting older. So today I am very versed in my own feelings. I understand my feelings. I understand situations. I understand what trauma can do and how to cope with it. So I learned a lot of coping skills as I got older, and now as an adult, I don't victimize myself anymore. I In other words, I not victimized, but I um I don't blame myself anymore. I don't create another problem, because that's another thing that I'm not sure if Mr. Buller was is aware that anyone who comes from abuse finds finds a way to create uh, a blamefulness within. And while we may not speak of it, it's constant. It's a constant reminder that diminishes our self-worth and value system. I and I had a, I and I had that a lot when I was growing up, where I would be so ashamed to do anything. I was so ashamed to wear shame to speak. I was ashamed to express how I felt about foods, how I felt about people in general. I lived in a very and considering that I came from a very conservative environment, that also played a lot of what was happening to me as a child. I know earlier we were discussing religions and how spirituality plays in trauma. In my case, it only added to it. And I don't want to discuss religion profoundly, but it imprisoned me from speaking of what I was going through. And I'll leave it at that, because that in itself is another show. The form of imprisonment that you feel from spirituality when where abuse is concerned. And but other than that, G Mike, no, I haven't lashed out. I just have really weird behavioral patterns, which I recognize, and when I recognize them, I try to correct them right away, at least so that the other, whoever I am in contact with, doesn't feel inadequate. But I no longer am ashamed to speak of it, and that's one of the brighter things with me, that I can openly discuss what happened to me, and I embrace it. I embrace what happened to me as an experience, so I can teach other people how to cope with their lifestyle too.
It seems that this book is certainly a book for you also. I hope you get it and read it. It sounds like a very good book for anybody
Right,
that
and
has
I
gone
wanted
through
to
what you've gone. Yeah.
Right, and I wanted to also add to what Mr. Buller was saying. He's been talking a lot about generational abuse, and I read a book recently, and I'm not sure if he's familiar with it. It's called Mother Hunger, and Mother Hunger basically reignites that's part of that generational abuse, with mothers and daughters, the relationships where mothers and daughters have. I've encountered in the last few years a lot of mothers and daughters really don't have great relationships, and you always hear them talk about, oh, moms are closer to sons and the dads are closer to their daughters. But there's something about mother daughter relationships that I find very interesting, and I found it very interesting to read the book, because it led me to understand generational abuse, and so of which we haven't as a culture, and I want to say as a Belizean culture, it's something that we haven't dealt with, generational abuse. I learned from reading the book. I started understanding my grandmother's way of raising my mother, and understood why my mother was raising and how my mother was raising me, and how certain abuses just go from generation to generation. And I was able to put it into perspective. And as he said, forgiveness is a huge factor. I today have a very, very beautiful relationship with my mother. And it all boiled down to the fact that I was able to take the time out to understand where she came from, and also understand where her mother came from, in order to go back and make those forgivenesses a long-term relationship today. So that's something I wanted to ask Mr. Buller. When he connected with his father at the age of 40, how was your relationship thereafter, considering his senior state and his disabilities?
So there's a lot that you said, and there are a number of things that I want to address. And so I know we're running short on time, so I'm gonna just try and run through this as fast as I can. First of all, I had long felt some level of discomfort with my father. Okay, when I was in my teens, I would see him coming down the street, and I would walk on the other side of the street and pretend I didn't see it. There was just this level of discomfort that I didn't understand, and I always blamed myself for it. Until I recovered the memories at the age of 40. He was 80 years old, and he told me what had happened to him, and then all of a sudden, I began to understand him for the very first time, because I saw him in a different light. I realized that we had suffered identical trauma and we had developed almost exactly the same behavioral pattern as a result. And so now I understood him better, and we became much closer ever since then. So that's the first thing. The second thing that you talked about was this aspect of shame and guilt, which I touched on before. But there's something else that I want to say about it, and blame, self-blame. I don't know if people realize it, but when you're a child, you can experience sexual pleasure. I was not quite 5 years old when the sexual abuse began. An adult. And for an eternity after that, I blamed myself because of the amount of pleasure that I experienced while that was going on.
This is male, female.
Yes.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it won't happen male, whatever. It can happen anyway, right?
Right.
But so I had to rid myself of that, and I did all of that because I was a real mess. I managed to do all of that through that process that I mentioned, where I had that catharsis. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about more importantly is what you mentioned about the cycle of abuse, generational abuse. And what goes hand in hand with that is a cycle of dysfunctional behavior. Now, how do you break the cycle? First and foremost, you have to break the silence. And my abuser, when we were children, me and my siblings, used to always run around the house saying children should be seen but not heard. All right? Now, clearly part of that was protecting herself for her dirty deeds. But in the end, I realized that part of the issue that I was having with not being able to write that second book was because I still felt that I had nothing to say. So I had to deal with all of it as well. But now the important part. I've long believed that whatever one generation tolerates becomes the norm for the next. Which means that if we continue to fail to fix the existing problems, things will only continue to spiral out of control with each successive generation. So now it becomes the norm for the next, but it doesn't just stay the same, it gets even worse. Now, that belief is being validated by epigenetics. Transgenerational epigenetic inheritance studies are now showing that ancestral memories get passed down into cellular memory. And how do they know this? They began with experiments with mice. They would provide a banana to the mice, and when the mice go for the banana, shock the mice. This is the male mice. And then, when that mice had offspring, immediately they removed the offspring and put the offspring with surrogate parents to raise them. And what happened? The male offspring had the exact same fear of bananas. And now they went so far as to prove that it's not just the offspring, but the next generation. So 3 generations affected by this same trauma. Then they went and they've done a limited number of studies now in humans, and have also proven that men pass this stuff down, the effects of the trauma, to their sons and to their grandsons. All right, so now they're doing studies because they suspect now that the same thing is true of females and that mothers pass it on to their daughters as well. All right, so the problem is now, if you as the son are the son of a father who was abused, you're going to have it from him because of this epigenetic memory. And it's not genetics, it's epigenetics, which means it can be reversed. So now you as the son have it from the father. But you were also abused, you got a double dose, because not only did you get it passed down genetically, but epigenetically, but then you got your own dose, so you are really a mess. I mean, really, really messed up. And if the 3rd generation is also abused, I fear for him.
Right.
I don't know how much hope there is if he doesn't have some kind of early intervention. So now you talk about solutions. And the solution to all of this is to reprogram,
Mm-hmm.
to change that programming, because what we're talking about is failure programming. And that's what I realized, right? As I sat by my father's bedside reading that second book and realizing that I was learning from the lessons it contained, I suddenly understood that the universe had been trying to teach me something for a very long time, but I had been too badly wounded to ever stand a chance of getting the message. And so my first two books were written primarily for me. I published it, the first and the second one, because I felt that other survivors could benefit by recognizing those dysfunctional patterns in their own lives and therefore have their first opportunity to begin the journey of healing and transformation. But they were primarily for me. And so now the additional books, I don't need that anymore because I've had the catharsis during the process of writing that first book. And so I'm in a different place now. So now I am really at a place where I could begin to help others, whereas prior to that, I would never have been able to do that.
Well, likewise.
I'm looking forward to reading this book. Certainly I'm going to grab me a copy of that. What are the other books? What are the names of the first three books that you wrote?
So the first book was Stolen Innocence, the autobiography of a lost soul.
Okay.
And that one is no longer in print. And I've done that deliberately because I don't want to focus on the past. That dealt with all the gory details of the abuse and the impact that it had on my life up to the point where I wrote it, which was in 2000. But since then, what's more important is all the lessons that I've learned about the whole phenomenon of abuse and the legacy of abuse and the impact on the individual, on families, and on society as a whole, and how to reverse it. And so that's what I'm focused on. The second book was called Mystic Musings. And that's the one that I was reading by my father's bedside, and that was also a poetry book. And that's still available, but I'm going to take it off print because I'm totally focused now on this new batch. The third one was Beyond Survival. How to go from surviving to thriving, right? But that one is also no longer available, and it's no longer available for a very specific reason, because I have since built upon what I knew at the time that I wrote that book. And so the helping profession, psychiatry, they will tell you that there are three stages of recovery. There is a victim, survivor, and thriver. But what I have realized is that there are two stages beyond that we must go to if we want to become all that we were meant to be. And that fourth stage is what I call the creator stage. You're beyond thriving. It's a creator stage. And then the fifth stage is what I call the master servant stage, or I've combined them and called it Marvant. And that's where you get to the point where you are the master of your life. You've achieved a state of mastery. And now what you're doing is you're becoming a servant by turning around and helping others to become all that they were meant to be.
Let me ask you a question. I may have missed something when you started earlier because I was a bit late, but does the duration of time of the abuse makes a difference, or just any quick period, something happened to you once and it becomes that traumatic event, or does a time period of consistent and consecutive behavior makes the difference in the degree of abuse that one feels?
First of all, any abuse is bad and traumatic, and will have an impact into your adulthood.
Yes.
Secondly, there are degrees, and those degrees can have to do with the severity, and they can have to do with the duration. Mine lasted from the time I was almost 5 years old until the time I was 11 years old.
It's an extended period, and it's a very developing period.
Yeah, and that's because I became a rebel. Well, the Catholic priest will tell you, give me a boy at 7 years old, because they know that at that age they can mold him. So they'll tell you, give me that boy at 7 years old, and I'll give you back a man, right? Because they know that those are the formative years where they can mold you. And so So again, if there's no early intervention, so nobody knows about it, and therefore you have to deal with it yourself, then the impact is much more severe. Early intervention can mitigate against the more severe impacts.
Do you think, Carlton, that nowadays there's more consciousness about this? There's more, it's easier to get help. There's a more of a support system in place for persons like yourself and Lisa that has gone through this. Have you seen improvement in that area?
Incremental, but not nearly enough. My book in 2000 began the conversation in Belize in public. In the days when I was abused, you as a child were not going to be allowed to ruin the good name of the family. So many, many children in Belize were sent away to live with relatives and nobody knew why. But that was the reason why, and nobody talked about it. So my book began that conversation. I can't tell you the number of people that came to me and thanked me and said, thanks for bringing this out in the open. Now, since that time, not nearly enough has happened. I'm here in America. You talk about worldwide. By the way, there are studies that show that 50% of the world's population has been abused as children. Right? Now that, by the way, is really, really, really a sad commentary. But I have seen improvement. There are more resources for men. Clearly, men are at a disadvantage because they're the ones that don't know how to deal with it. They're told not to cry, which is one of the things that helps you. It helps to wash away the pain, and they become emotionless. They don't talk with anybody about it, whereas women are more likely to talk to somebody, a close confidant, and so some of that is changing slowly. There is evidence here and there around the periphery that there's more help available, and you can see Facebook groups here and there. And there are a number of male Facebook groups that I belong to, and there are a number of general abuse groups that I belong to on Facebook as well. All these are closed groups, so you would never know, and there's no disclosure about who is in there and what is said. But there's a lot going on in those groups. But I have not seen those groups growing much over the years, and I'm talking at least 10 years or so that I've been a member of those groups.
Does abuse make men gay? Is that just something totally different that's going on?
Well, first and foremost, I don't know the answer to that question. Secondly, I would suspect that it may be the case in some of those cases. It may be the reason in some of those cases. But there are lots of men who are gay who were never abused by another man.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. You gave a stat 50% of people. You believe 50% of people in the world have been abused.
Yes.
That abuse would not be confined to just sexual abuse.
No, all types, multiple types. But again, as I said earlier, rarely, if ever, is only one type of abuse visited upon a child. I mean, typically, if you are physically abused, there's going to be some element of verbal, emotional, or psychological abuse. Right?
What's your connection with Belize now, Carlton?
I am very well connected to Belize in some ways. I
come often, I believe.
I come and I go. I maintain a place there, and I was there 2019 through 2000.
You drop off family.
But I go and I come.
Okay. Yeah. You're involved with any groups in Belize? Any special projects going on?
No. I mean, when I was there in 2019, I was involved with the Film Commission. I was working with Nigel Miguel, and in the Film Commission, helping to focus on bringing film projects to Belize and working on some of those projects. I stopped doing that once I came back, and then after I came back, he's no longer the film commissioner. But beyond that, other groups I'm not involved with. No.
Any thoughts of maybe putting one or two of these books into film, into movies?
When the first book, when I wrote the first book, I thought about it, right? Now I'm not so sure. maybe I would have to clearly understand what the benefit is of doing it. Not just for money, but what is the benefit of doing it, right?
That's a good question.
Because if it's going to help people with respect to creating awareness about the problem, then I would certainly consider it. But because of my focus on going forward and not going back to the past, I sort of moved away from that. I could be under the right circumstances.
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Mr. Buller, one of our audience members is asking, where do you have any of you? Is the Masterpiece book on Amazon, or where can we purchase the book?
So,
and
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Become Your Masterpiece is available on Amazon.com as both a hardcover book and an ebook. The content is identical. There may be a couple more images or so in the ebook. The hardcover is 128 pages. The ebook is 146 pages, and that is because I had to downsize it from 8.5 by 11 to 8 by 10 in order for it to fit within Amazon's guidelines for ebooks, and therefore it then expanded to 146 pages, and so I had to find a few more images to put in there to fill those pages. Because all of the poetry pieces have images that complement those pieces and help to tell the story. But so for people in Belize, where it might be difficult to get so first and foremost, the hardcover I highly recommend because it's designed as a lay flat book. You open it, you lay it flat, and you keep it somewhere. It's not the kind of book that you want to read, and then once you finish reading it, you put it on the top shelf of your bookshelf and then it's forgotten. It's the kind of book that you're going to want to leave on your coffee table or wherever, front and center. It's going to be a conversation piece for friends and family and guests about a very specific topic. Also for you might want to go back to
your name is what? Katie? Yeah. Oh, 1 second.
Hello? Oh, all right. So you definitely will want to come back to reread it because that's the way it's designed, and all the pieces that are in there will help you. But for people in Belize who don't have access to that, then the ebook, will suffice.
Well, certainly, if the images are as interesting as the story and the words in there, I'm looking forward to seeing those also. Thank you. We want to thank you, Mr. Buller. Guys, we're out of time. Gregory, any more?
Well, I do like the butterfly as he explains it, the metamorphosis, and that also represents nature's alchemy.
Yes. And the butterfly has some other interesting connotations there too. So you okay, right, Greg? You good? All right.
Yes, I'm good.
All right. Carlton, thank you so very much, sir. It's been an interesting show. The two of us went like that. I mean, you certainly have an interesting story, and obviously you've done a lot of research and a lot of reading and whatnot. We look forward to having you here again some other time. Well, maybe your next book, or when the book turns into a bestseller, we can talk about it more then, right? Thank you very much, Carlton, and much success going forward. No?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Stop in whenever you have something interesting to say.
Yeah, man, for sure. Lisa, thank you for joining us tonight and being involved and giving us some of your story. We'll have to have you on as a guest one of these days and get the full story, right?
Sure.
Hi, Lisa.
Thanks again. Greg, respect every time. CY, take it away. We're good.
Good night, guys.
Good night, everybody. Yeah, man.
Good night. Thank you very much, Mr. Carlton.
Wow, what's up? What's up? What's happening? You strapped and you locked into the one and only Sea Smoke. And wherever you see smoke, there is fire, lightning, thunder, brimstone, and lava. Keep it up full and bright. This is CY and Smokey Dan at the control. Don't touch and don't move.
G-Mac, bless up. Is there anyone else that can play for the king? There's no one in this kingdom that can play good music. Speak up. Is there anyone else? Yes, there is one. He lives down in the valley called the Gallis family. Some call him the beat maker. Some call him Don Juan. Yes. But what is his name? Sorry, sire. His name is Smokey Don Juan. And where he lives is at Studio One. Smokey Don Juan. Studio One. What's with the one? Let me explain, sire. Because he is the one. No one has yet to take his crown. His music is full of culture. No one can resist. Send for this Smokey Don Juan. Tell him the king has summoned him. Be quick about it. As you wish, sire. Get up, men. Get on your horses. You heard the king. Go down to the valley of the Gallis family and summon the one called Smokey Don Juan at Studio One. Racial profiling. Listen, me king, this one a top ranking. Racial profiling. It's a serious thing. A bird without wing. Racial profiling. I saw the thing set in a this I cannot breathe. Living while black, much less gonna Starbucks. Living while black. Up against the clan. Living while black. Life in my hand. Living while black. Kalama skin we under constant attack. Master race, master plan, the drive, hold me back. Smoke it on the rhythm, keep it on drop. Your movements, they just can't stop. I cannot tell what a POC. Hermit party will call the COE. I cannot enter a pool as a POC. Pool patrol caller calling the COE. Fire bill in the park as a POC. Barbecue Betty will call the COE. If I take it up at AR and be my persuasion cannot be a for POC. Racial profiling. Racial profiling. They feeling emboldened, shouting kill is golden. Y'all them lips loose like Jordan. Like they don't know say we are the chosen. Them entitled and privileged. Them go call the human race savage. It's nothing but a sacrilege when we get used as collateral damage. Racial profiling. It's a serious thing. Burn with a wing. Racial profiling. Listen, me king, this on your top of ranking. Racial profiling. It's a serious thing. Bird without wing. Racial profiling. So the things that in a this a shit thing. Overdosing on the Kool-Aid. Them consume with disdain and hatred. The masses is tired of being berated. Not like that civil wars get started. Charge out to them policies. Ripping apart families, privately owned shields, housing babies, and then them sleeping with we enemies. Racial profiling, it's a serious thing, burning on me. Racial profiling. Burning on me. Like robots, they program for mimic the administration. Europe here,
magicians, deflection, distraction. Things say we forget about the collusion. Right now, then they look for lift the sanction. Chain immigration applicable only to the black. And what about him and the nuclearization? Like Palestinians, mass incarceration, no equitable education. All them a preach for the division, hell-bent on world domination. Depopulation, spending trillions on space. Being a higher meditation, love of religion.
All my days, all my days, I wanna thank you, all my days, all my days. I wanna fight for you, won't you fight for me? All my days, all my days. I wanna love you, I love you. She gave me the love, I give her the healing. She required a man, I promise her I will be. I'm so much to mine. Don't let see you the world on the star, she is the you are my princess, I am your knight, and your tongue will come to you. I won't hesitate to find me. Why you sleeping out of the other one? So from you all night, every time we get together, boom, boom, dynamite. Oh, you world people from money, take you the wild. Whenever you get salty, I got you all around. Anything we do together, we do it over time. Unless you go my days, all my days. I wanna love you, all my days, all my days. I wanna love you, all my days, all my days. I wanna fight for you, won't you fight for me, all my days. Let me bless you, baby. Let me take care of you, baby. My ship is in the destructible, baby. Where we're going is at the do like unforgettable. Wanna take you to see Mount Everest. Take you on the Egypt, look around, oh better. Make sweet love, one of those sweet and great love. I wanna love you, all my days, all my days. I wanna love you, all my days, all my days. I wanna fight with you, all my
How can you stay in my soul? Like a bird to the mountain. In the land I put my trust. How can you stay in my soul? Like a bird to the mountain. After man, them have to set up a foundation. Yeah, let me society corruption. Them have a plan for elimination. There's a creation for every man with a ambulance officer. Open up your eyes and come live. Help them up in life where you know we can fake it. Breaking a middle, beating a middle, choosing a best man. Live off the dark. Tell them the Lord I put I trust. How can you set in my soul? Like a bird to the mountain. Yeah. In the Lord I put I trust. How can you set in my soul? Like a bird to the mountain. Seminar go run again. Me have to get me spirit gun. Me have to run again. Me have to come beat like a drum. Me have to dumb again. Never that man, me have to smart like a whip. Me have to cut it and to talk. You know you're being a dumb again. This shaman is dumb again.
Yeah, I'm gonna
maybe not come and relevant the Lord and what I trust. How can you say to my soul, I come back to the mountain, in the Lord and what I trust. How can you say to my soul, I come back to the mountain?
Answer my time comes. And the big tune. After so many years of struggling, suddenly I see a new day is dawning. I've had many bad breaks and many setbacks, bad decisions, irresponsible acts. But now I see a new day is dawning. I can see the success rising over the horizon. I can see a new day is dawning. The sun is rising over the horizon. Stand aside and watch me enjoy my blessings. Yeah. Come and join the fun. No need for hating. I paid my dues. Sometime I win, and sometime I lose. But right now, hey, it's my time of prosperity. Don't try to fight me. Eternity's my destiny. Oh yeah. Stand aside and watch me enjoy my blessings. Hey. After so many years of struggling, many bad breaks, many setbacks, bad decisions, irresponsible acts. Even when opportunity came knocking,
Wow, what's up? What's up? What's happening? You strapped and you locked into the one and only Sea Smoke, and wherever you see smoke, there is fire, lightning, thunder, brimstone, and lava. Keep it up full and bright. This is CY and Smokey Dan at the control.